5 years ago, the investigative journalist Nikole Hannah-Jones, in collaboration with a long list of other journalists and historians, published a long-form piece in the New York Times Magazine. It was called The 1619 Project. First published in August 2019, the project marked 400 years since the beginning of slavery in America.
Hey, shalom. Shalom, brothers. This is Brother Howard of GMS Toronto, coming back with another one. You so-called blacks, you cannot let go of the slave narrative. The slave narrative is what fuels the so-called black man and so-called black woman. Why? Because they don't know who they are. They're lost, right? That's why we're known as the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And also, confusion comes from not knowing who you are. And what does the scriptures say? They are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. And our people are suffering from lack of knowledge, right? Lack of knowing who they truly are, lacking of knowing where they come from. Our people don't know these things. So that's why they have to be educated, because they've been misinformed or miseducated.
The project was designed to make the consequences of slavery and the contributions of black Americans a larger part of our national discourse.
The contribution of slavery is what the contribution of slavery has always been. Economics. One person is in rulership, the other person is not. So then the other person has to work for the person who is in rulership. The slave is not equal to the master, the same way that the employee is not equal to the boss. But because we live in this society where most people are delusional, they think that they're going to gain equality with somebody that is above them. That life doesn't work that way. A father and a mother is not equal to a child. Just like when you're in school, a child is not equal to a principal. A principal is not equal to a teacher.
Nikole Hannah-Jones later developed that New York Times Magazine initiative into an award-winning book, also called The 1619 Project. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you do, or at least start with Hannah-Jones' first essay titled, Our Democracy's Founding Ideals Were False When They Were Written, Black America.
Hey, and no, they weren't false. They weren't false. The reason why they weren't false is because you, as the slave, you don't get rights. You don't get freedoms. You get privileges. The same thing as today. You people are citizens. You have no rights. You have privileges that can be taken away from you at any time, just like a child. You people are children. Don't you know you're in the place of a child? So every time that you guys are talking about, oh, my rights, my freedoms, you're not in that place.
Americans have fought to make them true. The premise is not complicated, nor should it be divisive. It's simply true. The principle that every man is created equal was not remotely true when it was written by this country's forefathers. Hannah-Jones won a Pulitzer Prize for the project, but of course we all know that the story doesn't end there.
You know what? Let's get a scripture. Let's see if every man was created equal. This is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. And it says, For thou art an holy people. And that word holy means to be separate, which means you're supposed to be separate from everybody else, meaning that you don't follow what they do. You don't do what they do. You don't dress the way they dress. You don't talk the way they talk. You don't eat what they eat. You don't practice what they practice. Okay? So for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power, Yahweh. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. So is everyone created equal? Obviously not according to the Heavenly Father, not according to who you people ignorantly call God. His name is Yahweh. He created one people to be above another people. Simple and plain. There's no way around it.
Of course, we all know that the story doesn't end there. A few months after Hannah Jones won the prize, our then President Donald Trump sparked what would become a nationwide backlash against her work.
The left has warped, distorted, and defiled the American story.
And I have to agree with him, right? The left, even though the right wing are of the same bird, right? The left wing, the right wing, it's still one bird. Both of them hold the bird up, which is that eagle. The eagle is flying because both left and right are in unison. The left, the way they do things is just in a different way, right? The left is liberal. The left is Luciferian. The left represents chaos. The left represents disorder. But they get order out of chaos. They get order out of disorder. So that's why they push different rights to different groups that really and truly shouldn't have rights. Really and truly. And if they do have rights, they're supposed to have a minimum amount of rights. Right? The majority of the people that the left props up are women, homosexuals, transgenders, and the majority of those people need mental health evaluations.
With deceptions, falsehoods, and lies, there is no better example than the New York Times totally discredited 1619 Project. This project rewrites American history to teach our children that we were founded on the principle of oppression, not freedom.
And he's right. And he's 100% right, because the 1619 Project is teaching that so-called white people were oppressing you so-called black people. And you so-called white people were not oppressing so-called black people at that time. You were not. So-called blacks were oppressing blacks. So-called. And the reason why I'm saying so-called is because that's a corporate designation. That's not a real nationality. You had Hebrew Israelites subjecting their own brothers who are Hebrew Israelites. They were taxing the hell out of them, and that started all the way in Europe, going back to that feudal system during the Dark Ages or the medieval period where you so-called black people were ruling Europe. And guess who you had in subjugation? Guess who were your slaves? They were known as Slavs and serfs at that time. The so-called white man, aka the caveman. Why? Because he was dwelling in the Caucasus Mountains of South Georgia, Russia. That's where you so-called white people were, right? Until we start using you. Well, first of all, a lot of the Edomites, they came out of the caves, right? That was the spread of the pneumonic and bubonic plague, or known as the Black Death, where 2/3 of Europe died, mainly you so-called black people. You died. The Caucasian man never died because he's the one that had the disease. He came out of the caves with a whole slew of diseases. That's why when he encountered the so-called natives, when he came over here to the Americas, mainly the United States and Canada, they got sick. And a lot of them died over here as well. Why? Because you so-called Caucasians were filthy in those caves. You ate raw meat. You slept with animals. Right? You ate out of your dead grandmother's skulls. You suffered from lice. All types of sexual diseases. You were filthy, man. You didn't even speak a language at that time. You brayed like a horse. This is Job chapter 30, verse 1. I have to get it. It says, "But now they that are younger than I have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock." Why? Because the Caucasian is known for bestiality. Verse 2, yea, whereto might the strength of their hands profit me, in whom old age was perish. For want and famine they were solitary, fleeing into the wilderness in former times, desolate and waste, who cut up mallows by the bushes and juniper roots for their meat. They were driven forth from among men who they were driven forth from the ruling class, right? From the what would you call that? For integrating with the so-called blacks during the medieval period. We didn't want to meddle with you. We didn't want to do business with you. We didn't want anything to do with you. So we put you in the caves to get the hell away from us. That was a jail sentence as well. They cried after them as after a thief. Why? Because that's where that term caught you red-handed comes from. Because who was the thieves? You so-called white people. You were thieves. You're a bunch of wicked men and you were thieves. That's why there's the saying, you've been caught red-handed. Why? Because you're not only rednecks, your face only doesn't get red, your whole body gets red because your blood shows forth through your skin. Right? Because your forefather, his name is Esau, in the Hebrew, Ishashua. Right? When you read Genesis 25, verse 21 on down, it lets you know about Jacob and Esau. And Esau's name was because his pigmentation was wasted away. Wasted away is he. What was wasted away? Your pigmentation. You didn't have any. You didn't have lots of melanin. You're low on melanin, so your blood shows forth through your skin. Okay, verse 6. To dwell in the cliffs of the valleys, in caves of the earth, and in rocks. So that's where you get the term Geico caveman. A quest for fire. That's your history. You're the Neanderthal. But that doesn't go back millions and millions of years ago. No. That was just the other day. During the Dark Ages or the medieval times, you Caucasians were in the Caucasus. Okay? It says, among the bushes they brayed. What does that mean? What do we mean to bray? A horse brays. Brrr, meaning that you didn't speak a language. Right? You were that low. Under the nettles they were gathered together. They were children of fools. Yea, children of base men. They were viler than the earth. Verse 9. And now I am their song. Yea, I am their byword. Why? Because they have completely changed the narrative. They have changed history. And they have told you so-called blacks that you are the slave. When that's not true. That is a complete fabrication. That is a complete lie. You are God's chosen people. You are the Hebrew Israelites of your respectable tribe, Judah, all the way down to Issachar. Okay? And you Issacharites are you so-called Mexicans. Don't you know in Mexico, in New Mexico, they found the Los Lunas stone. What's the Los Lunas stone? That's a stone that had the inscription on it in the Paleo Hebrew, right? With the laws. What does that say? That is saying that you are the children of Israel, right? So you Issacharites, right? You are one of the lost tribes of Israel, right? How did you get over here? You got over here fleeing from the Assyrian Empire. Took you a year and a half. You came over to an unknown land known as Asareth, but it was known. It was known by King Solomon and his navy. It was known by Hiram I, because they used to travel here every three years. Well, it took them a year and a half to come here, and then a year and a half to go back. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 13, verse 45. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, right? Because they traveled on boats. And the same region is called Asareth, right? And that is America. Asareth and America are synonymous. And that's how the 10 tribes got over here way before Columbus. Way before Columbus. This is 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 22. For the king, who, Solomon, had a sea of Salakia, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Harim once in 3 years. Why? Because it took them a year and a half to get there and a year and a half to get back. That's 3 years. The navy of Tarshish bringing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks, right? All from this unknown world at that time. But it was known to them, right? The Americas.
By viewing every issue through the lens of race, they want to impose a new segregation.
And I agree with Donald Trump again. By viewing everything through the lens of race, and when they say race, they don't mean actual race. They mean color coding. And color coding in America is complete distortion. That's confusion. Because you cannot claim black as a lineage. Black is not a lineage. That is not a people, right? That is not a place. And the same thing goes for white. White is not a people. White is not a lineage. White doesn't come with cultural practices. Neither does black. You know what comes with cultural practices? Being a Hebrew Israelite. Now that comes with history. That comes with laws, statutes, commandments, promises. It comes with dress, language, right? So that's who we truly are. We're not black. So just like Donald Trump is saying, the left, aka the liberals, right, are trying to create a divide. Yes, they are trying to create a divide because they want anarchy in the streets. Why? Because anarchy brings what? It brings order. They have a saying, a Luciferian saying, order ab chaos, order through chaos, or order out of chaos. That's what they want. They want these CCTV cameras everywhere to track you people. They want to implant you with a RFID chip, which is in the scriptures known as the MOTB. Right? They want armies in the streets. Right? But to do that, they have to create chaos first through civil unrest, crime in these streets. Right? That's what they want.
And we must not allow that to happen.
Much better story than what was actually happening. Shortly thereafter, Trump issued a series of executive orders targeting the idea specifically behind the 1619 Project. One of those executive orders established something called the 1776 Commission, which was a promise.
Hey, and if you know anything about 1776, two major things happened in 1776. There was something that happened May 1st, right, which is a high occult day known as May Day, right, and also July 4th, right, which is quote-unquote American independence. But that true American independence was May 1st, right, with the start of the Illuminati, right? So it's very high spiritual significance on the left-hand side for America, right? Most people think that it's just July 4th. No, it's actually May 1st.
To implement what he called a, quote, patriotic education and the banning of so-called divisive issues like reckoning with the racist history of this country. President Biden repealed the 1776 Commission on his first day in office, but the ideas behind it remain alive and well and strong across this country. In the following couple of years after it was published, states would introduce at least 23 gag orders targeting the 1619 Project by name. Dozens more bills targeted it indirectly, usually by attempting to ban discussions of its core ideas. Other ideas of how to think and talk about race in America got swept up into the battle as well. Last year, a study through UCLA found that including local efforts, anti-critical race theory measures have been introduced in every single state except for Delaware. The 1619 Project is not critical race theory in itself, but it inspired such broad backlash that almost any program, project, or theory about...
Exactly, it's not critical race theory because it's based upon a narrative that so-called black people have been slaves since the 1600s, and that is not true. We were still ruling in different parts of Europe at that time. We were still ruling in Russia. We had very, very rich people that were in America. People that were leaving Europe with their wealth coming to America. You had people that were huge landowners in America who also owned slaves.
Or theory about race came under attack. The effort to ban identity-conscious ideas and programs has led to the end of affirmative action. It's led to the widespread attacks on systems built to promote true equity, like diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Project 2025, the blueprint for a potential second term for Trump, funded by the Heritage Foundation, includes suggestions to eliminate critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and other identity-conscious paradigms from education nationwide, from all federal departments, from as many parts of American life as it can. In fact, the whole MAGA agenda can be seen as an answer to the 1619 Project. It actively promotes the widely debunked idea that claiming color blindness is how we're actually going to achieve equality in this country. It discourages or even outlaws schools from teaching about systemic racism. It removes black and indigenous histories from curricula. It glosses over the darkest parts of our national history. It claims that
because there's no such thing as a dark part of history. It's just history. There's no such thing as a dark part. For someone to gain rule, or for someone to gain power, they have to take it. This is Daniel chapter 7, verse 18. It says, "But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever." Right? So just like in that movie, Planet of the Apes, you Caucasians that think that this is a circle of life, that where when we take you down, then you take us down. And no. This is your last hurrah, Esau, you so-called white man. This is your last hurrah. You're done. There's no more rulership for you. You're going to be in servitude for 1,000 years. And after 1,000 years, you're going to be destroyed, man. You're done. Enjoy your time in rulership right now. Enjoy the delicacies, enjoy the women, enjoy the vacations, enjoy the murders, the killing, the rape, enjoy all of that now, because it's about to be up, you devils, man. It's done. That's it. Because when we take back the kingdom through the power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, you Edomites will never rule again. Never. That's it. Right? So we don't want none of you people to feel sorry for us. Don't feel sorry for us, man. Feel sorry for us for what? We're about to be in rulership. You should feel sorry for yourselves.
Claims that encouraging people to consider race and systems of oppression is in itself a form of racial discrimination. Pretending that we can ignore race, pretending that we can ignore the anti-black systems upon which this country was built, is a disservice to us, and it threatens our democratic system at its very core. Joining me now is the singular Nicole Hannah-Jones, creator of the 1619 Project, reporter for the New York Times Magazine.
And of course, it's a black woman. Of course. Because who's the number one tool of the Caucasian, especially the Caucasian on the left or on the liberal side? Who loves the Caucasian more than the so-called black woman? So everything the black woman does, you have to scrutinize. I'm not saying that her work is not good and she's not a good journalist. I'm not saying that. But everything the black woman does, you have to take in very critically. Because remember, they don't want acceptance from you so-called black men. They want acceptance from the so-called white man. Everybody already understands your place, so-called black man. They don't want to elevate your place because the black woman understands if your status is elevated, her status is now lowered. She understands when her status is elevated, your status is lowered. And because you so-called blacks, Latinos, and the Native Americans are the lowest people on the planet, why would our women want us to be elevated? No, they want equality with the white man. That's who they want equality with, not with us. They want acceptance from the white man. They want love from the white man, not from us.
Founder of the Center for Journalism and Democracy at Howard University. Whew, that was a lot. I remember when you first published this, before the book came out, you and I talked in this building, and it was really remarkable and interesting, but I don't think any of us were thinking this is how it was going to unfold.
God, no. You know, it's been 5 years, which seems at once a long period of time and a short period of time. But when you think of everything that's happened since we had our first conversation, it really is remarkable. The way that government is using state power to try to mandate our ignorance, even as we see the effects of this.
Government has always mandated ignorance among the masses. They've always done that, right? That's why King James was so controversial as well, because he when the Bible was to be converted into the common language at that time, right, from out of the Latin, there was a big uproar because the priests and the clerics and the bishops and all those people at that time were making so much money from the common man. They could tell the common man whatever he wants. The common man wasn't able to read the Bible for himself. You had to be a learned man, right? You had to be a learned man, especially to know the Latin. The Latin is not an easy language, right? It's not an easy language. But look at this. What I wanted to point out is look at this lady's last name. Her last name is Jones. And our last names we have attributed to the Caucasian. We have exalted the white man to such a level that we have given him power above us, not only physically, not only mentally, but also emotionally, also spiritually. And because we've done that, we're even letting this Caucasian man think that we got our last names from him because we were on the plantation, when that's not the way that it went. You came over here with those names from Europe, you so-called black men, so-called black women, right? And Jones is one of them, right? Which just goes back to John, right? Or Johnson. The last name Johnson just means son of John. Okay? And it's the same thing with the last name Jones. They really go back to the 5th and 6th centuries, starting with the Germanic tribes led by the Angles and the Saxons. And they began to settle in England. They took over the Celtic tribes, which is our people as well, right? They were later known as Celts. Before that, they were known as Phoenicians, right? From the Phoenicians, you got the Vikings as well, The beginning of the Phoenicians, there was a mix of Hamitic and Hebrew people or Israelite people, going back to Hiram the first, like when we read the scripture in Kings, right? When King Solomon sent his navy led by Hiram the first. He was a Phoenician, right? Later on, you Israelites also mingled among the Phoenicians, later becoming the Vikings, right? Or the Celts, the Celtic tribes, right? It was brother versus brother. The Celtics were killed, or they joined with the Angles and the Saxons, who later became the Anglo-Saxons. And by the 7th century, Anglo-Saxons had control of 11 kingdoms, one being Northumbria, Mercia. So if you watch things like the Vikings, you watch shows like the Vikings, those should be so-called black people. Those are supposed to be so-called black people. Those are not supposed to be white people that are playing those roles. You Caucasians were in caves at that time. You were in caves. You weren't in rulership. The people that were in rulership was so-called blacks. We were ruling all throughout Europe at that time. All throughout Europe we were ruling. Okay? So I was saying Mercia, you had Wessex, you had Kent, you had Essex, Sussex, East Anglia, and there's a couple more. I can't remember the names off the top of my head, which is why so many so-called black people have English last names, just like Job's, because we ruled these places. It was not because of slavery. That's a part of the lie. The Britons at that time, they fled into the hills and found safety from Irish settlers that were also Israelites, and called themselves Cymri or Camry. Can't remember how to pronounce it, but Cymri, right? And that the Cymri meaning fellow countrymen, which literally proves the connection. Literally, it proves the connection between the Celts and the Irish that were in the hills, right? It's that meaning fellow countrymen. But the Saxons called them foreigners. There was a name for it, Wellas. I think it's pronounced Wellas. I think that's what it's pronounced as, Wellas, something like that, right? But it means foreigners.
Playing out in our society every day.
And I left a lot of stuff out of that story, including stuff that happened to you. But I think it's important to point out that you don't play, nor do you think you're a victim of this whole thing. In fact, when we spoke a few months ago, I want to just read, I want to play back actually what you said to me about this. Let's listen to this.
No one is more surprised at what both 1619 has become symbolically and what I've become symbolically. This was just a work of journalism to me, and I hope people would read it, but I certainly didn't think it would kind of spawn this backlash that we've seen. You know, all of these anti-critical race theory laws, they began as anti-1619 project law.
It should spark backlash because so-called white people are getting tired of the lie. They don't want to expose the lie, because they love you so-called blacks being in ignorance. But because you have you so-called black people that are pushing for 40 acres and a mule and reparations and all of these things, these so-called white people are getting tired of it. They're getting tired of it. They're getting tired of hearing your friggin' complaints, because your complaints are not historical. Because if they were supposed to give reparations or 40 acres and a mule to you so-called blacks, you know what you're going to find out as so-called blacks? That all so-called black people were not in slavery. The majority of you never came over here by cargo slave ships. A lot of you came here from Europe. Wealthy. Wealthy. A lot of you came over here as princes, princesses, kings, noblemen, counts. You came over here with regal titles, lords, ladies, with the amount of wealth that could literally buy lands. You were landowners, man. You were landowners. And the so-called white man came over here as trash, trailer park trash with nothing but diseases. He had nothing but diseases and ignorance and violence. That's what he came over here with. He never came over here with wealth. So the so-called white man is tired of the lie because it's getting out of hand. Because when you so-called blacks find out your true history, you're going to be surprised, because a lot of you so-called blacks, especially you so-called blacks that are prominent now today, you were the ones that were putting your own brothers through hardships and putting your own brother in captivity. And that's what we're going to find out, man. We're going to find out that a lot of you so-called blacks who are bourgeois, you know, you might live in Beverly Hills, or you might live in the Baldwins, you know, or these different rich places all throughout the world. We're going to find out that a lot of you oppressed your own brothers. That's what we're going to find out. Okay? But going back to the Welsh, the writings in Welsh began around the 700s. Okay? AD. And that's where a lot of our last names come from. Nothing to do with Caucasians, right? Most of them were in caves or subject to wealthy or ruling Israelites, right? The Normans later took over after the Battle of Hastings. So if you know anything about the Battle of Hastings, that happened in about 1066, right? The TV, what's that TV show? There's a TV show called The Tudors. The Tudors, and they were a Welsh dynasty. So if you watch The Tudors, though, that should be a TV show strictly about so-called blacks. So-called blacks, right? Welsh people were some of the first to settle in America as well, fleeing the Church of England's influence and tax. Because you so-called blacks, you were taxing other so-called blacks, right? We had a feudal system at that time, and brothers could look up that. Look up what a feudal system is, right? You had a lot of so-called blacks that were working off of the land of rich so-called blacks, right? We were barons, right? We were princes, princesses, kings, queens. We were counts, countesses. We were lords. We were ladies. We were people of status, man. We were doing really, really well, right? But then at that time you had Welsh Methodists, Welsh Baptists. And what is the form of church system that these so-called blacks are into today? A lot of these so-called blacks are Baptists, right? They settled in a place in 1662 known as Massachusetts. Do you know a place named Massachusetts? Well, you should, because that's in America, right? They established a town called Swansea, right? And even here in Canada, we have a neighborhood by the name of Swansea. And you want to know who dwells there? It's a ghetto. You want to know who's there? You so-called blacks. You dwell in a place called Swansea, right? And some believe that their Welsh forefathers sailed to the Americas hundreds of years before Columbus and settled and intermarried with the Aboriginals, aka Native Americans. And that is true. That is true. Right? That is also true. Hey, according to a plaque to Madoc Owain G. Netters. Madoc, M-A-D-O-C, last name spelled G-W-Y-N-E-D-D. Right? So according to a plaque that's on the wall of a fine arts center of the South in Mobile, Alabama, visitors can see where Prince Madoc, the Welsh explorer of America, is believed to have arrived with 3 ships. Also a plaque of the Daughters of the American Revolution, which is located on a public stand of Mobile Bay, and it reads, "In memory of Prince Madoc, a Welsh explorer who landed on the shores of Mobile Bay in 1170 and left behind with the natives the Welsh language." You understand? This is how deep our history goes, man. And in 1170, a lot of you Caucasians were still in caves. A lot of you were working off of the lands. You were known as Slavs and you were known as serfs, right? We, the so-called blacks, were landowners. And you so-called white people, you worked off of the land for us. Okay? And let me say this before I play the video. You had many Welsh, Irish, Scottish, and English countrymen journey to America seeking better life. And most of them died on the journey through the Atlantic Ocean because of the harsh conditions like overcrowding, stormy Atlantic Ocean weather, right? Some arrived in North Carolina in 1591. Some of them even went to Canada, which is where I reside now. They went to Canada after the 7 Years' War, right? And you brothers can look up the 7 Years' War as well. Settlers migrated from the U.S. into Canada. They were moved into where? Nova Scotia, the St. Lawrence, and the Niagara regions, right? There's a book. It's a book called Origins of the American Indians by Lee Huddleston, and it details how Edomites tried to associate Native Americans to China, Carthage, and even the biblical Solomon Empire of Ophir. Right? And in 1567, a Dutch theologian by the name of J. Luminous made the first serious claim that natives, right, were descended from the lost Jewish tribes. They also identified Asareth with America. Okay? So we have a lot of history, man. And the fact that we're just coming back to this history now, it's going to take us time. It's not something we're going to learn overnight, right? And there's going to be misinformation as well, right? Brothers are learning how to be scholars. And to be a true scholar, it takes time and research, man. Dedication.
And it's really become this cultural phenomenon. But I guess that speaks to why we became journalists, understanding the type of impact and power that we can have around the idea of narrative and how we see our society.
Exactly. You journalists, you have a great impact upon society, right? Because you also have what is known as disinformation, misinformation. You also you journalists use a tactic known as the Hegelian dialectic. Look that up. Okay? During the time of, what's that guy's name? Hitler. He used, Oh my gosh, what's that tactic used? And they use it today? Oh my gosh. Damn. If it comes back to me, I'll let brothers know. But what's that tactic Hitler used, man, when it comes to like information and media? Oh my gosh, the name eludes me right now. If any brother puts it. If every brother can find out, put it in the chat or the messages. Damn, I can't remember. He used. Oh my gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue.
And that's the point of the exercise, right? You did actually provoke a discussion. So now what happens? You poked the bear. There was some dry tinder there, and you lit it. Now what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that you don't see a project facing this type of backlash if that project is not having impact.
Right.
And every day I speak all over the country, and I see thousands of Americans, white Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, Black Americans.
And that's the confusion. There's the confusion right there. Everything she just mentioned, that's not a people. That's not a people. Those are corporate designations for the international bankers. That's what the international bankers call you, to take away your true human rights. You people think you have human rights, but you're not human. None of you are human if you associate yourself with black, or you associate yourself with white, or you associate yourself with Native American. Those are not nationalities. Those are not biblical nationalities, right? You have to go back to your origins or go back to your tribe. And you people don't have an origin. Your origin is beginning either in America or Africa, which that's a distortion of history as well, because the majority of you so-called blacks did not come from Africa.
We're saying, I understand my country better, who are starting to really critique so much of the inequality that we accept. But now what happens next, though, I think is largely dependent upon us. Which version of America are we going to allow to move forward? We are in, as you know, an extremely polarized time, a time where...
And that's why you can write a book like this. You can write a book like this and get traction, because we're in a polarized time where a lot of people are quote unquote woke or quote unquote liberal. So it's cool to talk about race and to bait people into conversations that have no end. But what is the truth? Right? What is the truth? We should be promoting truth, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, not provoking debate. Debate, debate, debate. All you people want to do is debate, man. This is 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 4. Never give heed to fables and endless genealogy, which minister questions, rather than godly edifying, which is in faith. So do, which is what we should be trying to obtain. More knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Because these great debates leave you worse than before. Sometimes they're just trying to push a narrative on you to where white is fighting against black. So that means she's playing right into that race conversation, black versus white. There's no change. There's no enlightenment, because knowledge should set you free. That's what we try to do here at GMS. We give brothers knowledge to set them free, not to bound you. So you can understand yourself, understand who you are, to give you a self of self, to give you some sort of a value, instead of for just saying every single day, yeah, I'm a slave. Yeah, I'm a slave. Yeah, I'm a slave. What? Are you anything else? This is Titus chapter 3, verse 9. But avoid foolish questions and genealogies and contentions and striving about the law, for they are unprofitable and vain. And certain things that you men do are unprofitable and they're vain. Like when you go back and forth with a woman, that's unprofitable. That's vain. when you're going back and forth about race, about black and white, that's unprofitable and vain.
We are in, as you know, an extremely polarized time, a time where people whose views seem antithetical to democracy are really pulling the levers of power to make it harder for us to vote, to make it harder for us to have a shared sense of civic obligation to each other. So I don't know what's going to happen next, but I fear, as I know you do, that we're ahead. We have some very dark times ahead, unless we as Americans...
That's where we're headed. We're headed towards civil war. But that's something that you people on the left want. You're promoting civil war. You're promoting civil unrest. Right? That's why you people are going against Donald Trump. You wanted Trump out of office. And now that you got Trump out of office, the people that support Trump want him back in office. So all we're creating is going to be civil unrest, civil disobedience, treason. All these different things are going to come forth into Canada, America. Why? Because the left side or the liberals are pushing for this. This is what they want. This is what they want. You people are not being educated. A battery is being put in your back. That's all that's happening. That's why you have all these marches. People are marching, or these riots, and none of it is leading to any conclusion. It's just leading to martial law. That's what it's going to lead to.
Decide that we want a different country.
I don't wish to draw you into a debate with Donald Trump, but what do you say to people who say that you're trying to frame all of our history and society through race in some way that's damaging? I didn't hear that. When I first read what you wrote and subsequently the book, that's not how I saw it. I saw you adding more information to our corpus of history and knowledge about ourselves.
Well, it's fascinating to hear that argument from people who themselves are obsessed with race, right? These attacks on affirmative action, these attacks on DEI, the attacks on immigrants, these are all race obsessions, but they're...
Yeah, and she's right about that. These people, you so-called white people, are race obsessed, right? Or color obsessed. But at the end of the day, you so-called black people need to remove yourselves from the discussion. You so-called black people shouldn't even be triggered by the word a Negro anymore. You so-called blacks hear a white person call you the N-word and you lose it. For what? That word should not have any significance over you. That's how you know the so-called white man has emotional control over you, psychological control over you, mental control over you. You so-called blacks are under MK Ultra. You're under mind control, man.
Pretending that it's in fact people like myself and the work that we produced that is divisive. We have to be honest about our history, and parts of our history are very ugly. But how can we possibly try to become the country of our highest ideals if we're not honest about what we were built upon? And if you actually read the project, it's actually the most patriotic thing I've ever read.
It's not angry. It's not. It's simply here's a piece of the story that is left out of our own narrative about ourselves.
Absolutely.
Why don't we have a more complete look at this thing? It doesn't come away as angry. It doesn't come away as mad at anyone. It doesn't come away as vengeful or divisive.
No, I mean, what it argues is that we have failed to live up to our ideals, but that black Americans joined with other Americans to fight.
And that's how you know the so-called black woman is not trying to change anything. She's not trying to change anything. She's literally going to be who she is. She won't change. She will not change. She is going to be who she is. You know what I mean? So at the same time, it is what it is. Nothing is going to change. That's why they're saying, oh, is it angry? Is it decisive? Is it this? Because they're telling you how to express yourself. Who the hell can tell you how to express yourself? Nobody should be able to tell you how to express yourself, especially if you're not being violent, right? Like the scripture says. This is Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. It says, be ye angry and sin not. Right? So as long as you're not sinning, why can't you be angry? Right? Because the history between so-called black and white is not a good history, right? Both people did both people dirty on each side, right? During the time of the KKK, you so-called white people did so-called black people dirty. During the time of the prison industrial complex, you so-called white people have done so-called black people dirty. So we're not friends. So we're not gonna, let's stop acting like we're friends. We're not friends. None of us are brethrens. We're not friends. We're not brethrens. We're enemies, man. We're really and truly enemies. It is what it is. You can't change it.
To our ideals, but that Black Americans joined with other Americans to fight to try to make those ideals manifest. It actually is empowering. It says that we don't have to accept the society that we have, and that I actually think the highest calling of patriotism is not to say we can't ever critique our country, but to say that if our country is great, we have to work to make it so. That's true patriotism. Most of the people, though, who critique this project, who are trying to ban this history, it's clear they haven't read it, or they haven't grappled seriously and sincerely with its ideals and arguments.
And America could never be great. America was never great because America is a Luciferian society. The way that America is built, it's built to worship these different idols, starting with the mother goddess, the father goddess, and their son. Okay, that's why you have a statue of the mother goddess in New York that you call Statue of Liberty, where that's Hecate, right? The goddess of witchcraft. That's why you have owls all throughout America. That's why you people promote certain lewd behavior in America. Okay, so America is never going to be great. America is a Luciferian place. And it's disgusting and it's filthy and it's going to be destroyed, man. It's going to be destroyed by the hands of Yahushua, which is the son of Yahweh, who you people ignorantly call God, man. So that's what you people have to look forward to, man. So don't think that, we could fix this issue. There's nothing to be fixed in a place that needs to be destroyed. This place is going down. Right, just like Sodom and Gomorrah, because this place is Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, but I didn't even think this lesson was going to go this long, but so when you're in the spirit, you're just in the spirit. So with that, I like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Rakakodash. Double honors unto the elders and elder apostles of GMS that rule well and that teach well, and to you brothers on the four corners of the earth that are doing this work in truth and in sincerity. Shalom. Till next